The room was unusually quiet, as if even the air itself had grown hesitant to move. Outside the large glass windows, the city carried on with its endless rhythm, cars honking in the distance, people rushing through their lives. But inside, time felt frozen. At the center of the room stood a table, polished yet cold, with a single document resting on it. Divorce papers. Neatly arranged. Final. The husband stood on one side, his expression firm, almost rehearsed. There was no visible hesitation in his posture, no trembling in his hands, only a quiet certainty that he had already made peace with his decision. He glanced once at the papers, then at the woman across from him, his wife. She stood still, her hands gently clasped in front of her. There was no argument on her lips, no pleading in her eyes. Only silence. The kind of silence that carries everything words cannot hold. Her face was calm, but beneath it lay a storm she refused to show. Backhand index pointing right if you are enjoying this emotional story. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. It really helps us bring more stories like this. The husband exhaled slowly and picked up the pen. "This is for the best," he said flatly, as if repeating something he had told himself many times before. "We both know this isn't working anymore." She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes lowered slightly, not in defeat, but in acceptance. A long pause stretched between them, heavier than any accusation. Finally, she spoke softly. "Is that what you truly believe, or what you want to believe?" The question lingered in the air, unanswered. He didn't look at her again. Instead, he signed his name with a firm, decisive stroke. The ink marked the end of something that once had promises attached to it. "I've moved on," he added, almost as an afterthought. "I deserve a fresh start." A faint, distant expression crossed her face. Not anger, not bitterness, but something closer to quiet understanding. Like someone watching a door close that they had already stopped trying to hold open. Outside, a soft breeze tapped against the window, carrying the sound of life continuing somewhere far away. She stepped forward slowly, not toward him, but toward the table. Her fingers lightly touched the edge of the papers, as if confirming their reality. Then she pulled her hand back. "Then it's done," she said simply.
No tears. No collapse.
Only acceptance. As she turned slightly toward the door, the husband finally felt it, a strange emptiness he could not yet name. But he dismissed it quickly. In his mind, he was not losing something. He was beginning something new. And behind him, the silence she left behind began to speak louder than anything he had said. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt empty in a way that went beyond silence, like the walls themselves had stopped recognizing the people who once lived within them. In the bedroom, the wife stood beside an open suitcase. There was no rush in her movements, no panic, no emotional collapse. Only quiet precision, as if she was packing not just her belongings, but the last remaining pieces of a life she had already accepted as finished. A few clothes, a small box of personal items. Nothing more. Behind her, the mirror reflected a woman who looked unchanged on the surface, yet entirely different within. Her eyes carried the weight of everything she had never been allowed to say. As she folded a scarf, her hands paused for a moment. And then the memories came. A flash of laughter in the same kitchen years ago, when the house had once felt warmer. She was serving tea, smiling softly as the husband sat at the table, too distracted to notice her presence. "Did you even eat today?" she had asked once gently. He had not looked up.
I'm busy. Not now.
Another memory followed. Late nights when she waited for him to return, food kept warm that slowly grew cold. Phone calls unanswered. Excuses repeated. Still, she stayed. Because love, to her, was not loud. It was patient. It was enduring. But patience over time began to resemble silence. She blinked, returning to the present. The suitcase was now closed. From the hallway, the faint sound of the front door closing earlier echoed in her mind. The final signature, the final decision. She picked up the suitcase handle. Each step she took toward the exit felt heavier than the last, though nothing physically weighed her down anymore. As she passed the living room, her eyes briefly lingered on a framed photograph on the wall, one from better days. A version of her smiling beside him, believing in forever. Her fingers brushed the edge of the frame, but she did not take it. Instead, she whispered softly, almost to herself, "I stayed longer than I should have." The words were not bitter, just final. She opened the door. Outside, the world was brighter than she remembered, the air carrying a strange sense of possibility she had long forgotten existed. And as she stepped out, leaving the house behind, she did not look back, not even once. Because some endings are not moments of destruction. They are moments of release. The city skyline glowed warmly that evening, golden light spilling across glass buildings and polished streets. Everything felt alive, bustling traffic, distant laughter from cafes, the rhythm of a world that never paused to question its own decisions. Inside an upscale rooftop restaurant, the atmosphere was quieter, more controlled. Soft music played in the background, blending with the gentle clink of glasses and low conversations from nearby tables. At a corner seat, the husband sat with a posture that carried quiet pride. His suit was perfectly pressed, his expression composed, but beneath it, there was something sharper, a sense of achievement he could barely contain. Across from him sat his childhood crush. She looked exactly as he remembered her from years ago, yet more refined now, confident, elegant, aware of her presence in every small movement. When she smiled, it carried familiarity, the kind that made the past feel closer than it should have been. "I told you I'd make things happen," he said, sliding a folded document across the table. She glanced at it, curious. "What is this?" Without hesitation, he leaned back slightly, as if revealing something important. "It's done. I finalized my divorce." For a brief moment, her expression shifted, surprise, followed quickly by approval. Not shock, not concern. Approval. "You really did it," she said softly, almost impressed. He nodded, a faint smile forming. "I told you I would. I don't make empty promises." There was a pause between them, filled not with doubt, but with validation. The kind that strengthens belief rather than questions it. She reached for her glass, taking a slow sip. "I always knew you were serious," she said. "People talk a lot, but very few actually act." Those words settled into him like confirmation. Like everything he had done had finally been justified. For the first time in days, he felt light again.
Certain. Correct.
"You and I, this is how it was always meant to be," he said, leaning slightly forward. She smiled at that, not deeply emotional, but warmly satisfied, as if a long-awaited possibility had finally become real. Outside the glass walls, the city continued its endless motion, unaware of the personal decisions being celebrated within. The husband glanced out at the skyline, convinced he had stepped into a better chapter of his life. Behind his confidence, however, a truth he could not yet see was already beginning to form, quiet, distant, and unstoppable. Because while he was celebrating a beginning, someone else was already entering a world he could no longer reach. The city had shifted into its evening glow, where neon reflections shimmered across wet streets and luxury cars moved like silent symbols of power. At the center of it all stood a towering five-star hotel, glass, steel, and elegance rising above the noise of the world below. Inside the grand entrance, everything was calm, controlled, and expensive. Soft lighting bathed the marble floors in a golden hue, and the faint sound of a piano drifted through the lobby, like a quiet signature of wealth. Then she appeared, the ex-wife. She stepped through the revolving doors with a calmness that did not match her surroundings. It matched something within her. There was no hesitation in her stride, no trace of uncertainty. Only composure, as if she belonged exactly where she was walking. Her appearance was simple, yet undeniably refined. Not loud luxury, but effortless confidence, the kind that doesn't ask for attention, yet commands it anyway. Beside her walked a man the entire lobby seemed to recognize without needing introduction. A billionaire. His presence changed the air slightly. Not with arrogance, but with authority, the kind that comes from influence, not noise. A hotel staff member immediately stepped forward. "Good evening, sir, ma'am. Your suite is ready." The respectful tone was subtle, but noticeable, especially the way his gaze briefly shifted toward her before returning to the billionaire, as if unsure where her place truly was in this hierarchy. The billionaire gave a slight nod. "Thank you. We'll proceed." But it was the woman who caught attention now, not him. As they moved through the lobby, conversation softened. Heads turned briefly, then looked away, unsure why she felt important, but sensing it clearly nonetheless. She walked beside him without effort, her expression calm, unreadable. Yet there was something different about her now, something no longer tied to the past she had left behind. As they entered the private elevator, the mirrored walls reflected them both. The billionaire finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Everything is moving faster than expected." She looked at her reflection for a moment before replying. It was always going to. A pause. Not tension, certainty. The elevator doors began to close slowly, sealing them away from the world below. For a brief second, the camera of life, if it were watching, might have noticed something subtle but undeniable. This was not a woman being introduced to power. This was a woman returning to it. And somewhere far away, a man who thought he had just started a new future had no idea his past was already rewriting itself without him. The meeting room was located high above the city, where glass walls stretched from floor to ceiling and the skyline looked almost unreal, like a painting of power and ambition frozen in time. Outside, clouds drifted slowly across the horizon, while inside, the air was sharp, focused, and filled with quiet authority. A long polished table sat at the center of the room, surrounded by high-level executives and business associates. Laptops were open, documents neatly arranged, voices low but precise. This was not a place for hesitation, it was a place for decisions that shaped industries. At the head of the table sat the billionaire.
Calm.
Controlled. Observant. And beside him, she sat the ex-wife. At first glance, nothing about her demanded attention. No dramatic presence, no forced dominance. Yet the room seemed to adjust itself around her naturally, as if recognizing something unspoken. The discussion continued. A senior executive spoke, presenting projections. "If we proceed with the expansion in this region, the initial risk is..." Before he could finish, she gently interjected. "That assumption is outdated." The room went quiet for a fraction of a second. Not offended silence, curious silence. She continued, her voice steady, measured, and clear. "The market data you're using doesn't reflect the latest consumer shift in that sector. If we proceed with that model, we won't just slow growth. We'll lose positioning within 6 months." A few exchanged glances. The executive hesitated. "And your alternative?" She slid a document forward. "Recalibrated entry strategy. Lower initial margin, higher long-term control. It prioritizes dominance over speed." The billionaire didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He was watching her not as someone being tested, but as someone being understood. One of the associates finally leaned back slightly, surprise breaking through his professional composure. That level of restructuring, was this prepared recently? She met his gaze calmly. It was prepared before it was asked for. A faint shift moved through the room. Respect. Not given. Earned. Backhand index pointing right, and right here, the real question begins. Did he lose her? Or did he simply never understand her value? Watch till the end, because the truth changes everything, and tell us in the comments what you think she will do next. The billionaire finally spoke, his tone quiet but firm. Proceed with her version. No debate followed.
No objections.
Just acceptance. Because in that moment, it became clear, this was not someone being included in the conversation. This was someone shaping it. The meeting continued, but the dynamic had changed completely. Every suggestion now passed through a new lens, every decision subtly aligned around her perspective. And as the city lights began to glow brighter outside the glass walls, one truth settled into the room without needing to be spoken. She was no longer the woman who had been overlooked. She was the mind that could no longer be ignored. The office was unusually loud for a place that was supposed to feel controlled. Phones kept buzzing. Notifications kept stacking. Screens kept refreshing as if the world itself had decided to accelerate all at once. The husband sat behind his desk, still wearing the same calm confidence he had carried just a day ago. But now, that confidence felt thinner, like glass beginning to show invisible cracks. Across from him, a friend leaned forward, holding his phone. "Have you seen this?" he asked, voice lower than usual. The husband frowned. "Seen what?" The phone was turned toward him. A photo, then another, and another. His ex-wife, standing beside a man he immediately recognized as a billionaire, entering a luxury venue, sitting in a high-end meeting environment, walking through a hotel lobby where even the staff seemed to treat her differently. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just stared. "That's not possible," he finally said, almost too quietly. That's her." Another associate quickly added, scrolling through his own screen. "It's already circulating everywhere. Social media, business forums, people are saying she's now connected to him." The words didn't land at first. Connected. To a billionaire. He leaned back in his chair, trying to process it, but the images refused to leave his mind. The same woman he had signed away without hesitation, now surrounded by attention, luxury, and influence. His jaw tightened. This must be some misunderstanding. But even as he said it, his voice lacked conviction. His friend hesitated before speaking again. "There's more." They were seen together at a private business meeting. Not just casually, she was part of it. Silence dropped into the room. A heavier silence than before. The kind that doesn't just pause conversation, it breaks it. The husband stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back. "No, she wouldn't. She doesn't even." He stopped mid-sentence. Because the truth he was trying to deny was already spreading across every screen in front of him. She wasn't just seen with the billionaire. She was standing beside him, as an equal. His phone buzzed again. Another headline. Another photo. And suddenly, the decision he had made so confidently just 24 hours ago didn't feel like freedom anymore. It felt like loss. Outside the office window, the city continued moving as if nothing had changed. But inside him, something had already started collapsing, quietly, completely, and without mercy. And for the first time, he began to understand a terrifying possibility. He might not have moved on at all. He might have let go of the one person who was rising far beyond his reach. The city outside was bright and indifferent, as if nothing in it had changed. But inside the husband's world, everything had tilted off balance. He stood in front of a tall glass building, staring at the entrance like it might still open the life he thought he could reclaim. Luxury cars passed behind him. People in expensive suits moved in and out without noticing his hesitation. He finally stepped forward. Inside, the lobby was calm, polished marble floors, soft lighting, the quiet confidence of wealth. But for him, every sound felt louder than it should have been. He approached the reception desk. "I need to see her," he said quickly. The receptionist looked up, polite but firm. "Do you have an appointment?" "She knows me," he insisted. "I'm her husband, ex-husband. Just tell her I'm here." A brief pause. Then a professional smile that said nothing personal would be acknowledged. "I'm sorry, sir. She is in a meeting."
His jaw tightened.
"Then I'll wait." But hours passed, and nothing changed. He sat in the waiting area, watching doors open and close, watching people pass who looked like they belonged in a world he was no longer part of. Every few minutes, he checked his phone, no reply. No call. No message. Finally, he saw her. She stepped out of a private corridor, walking beside the billionaire. She looked different now, not in appearance, but in presence. There was no hesitation in her movements, no softness of uncertainty. She moved with quiet authority, as if every step had purpose. His breath caught. He stood immediately. "Wait, please."
She stopped.
But she did not turn fully toward him. That hurt more than if she had ignored him completely. "I just need to talk," he said quickly, stepping closer. Everything happened too fast. "I made a mistake." For the first time, she looked at him, calmly, without anger, without sadness, without recognition of the emotional weight he was carrying. Just distance. You chose what you wanted, she said softly. I didn't know. You didn't ask, she interrupted gently. The billionaire stood beside her, silent, observing, not threatened, not involved, simply present. The husband took another step forward. We can fix this. I can fix this. A pause. Then her voice, final and steady. Some things don't need fixing. They just need to end. She turned slightly, signaling the conversation was over. Security nearby shifted subtly, not aggressively, but firmly aware. The husband froze, because in that moment, he realized something he had refused to accept. He was no longer part of her world, not even as a memory she needed to return to. As she walked away with the billionaire, disappearing into the private corridor again, the silence she left behind was louder than any words he had ever heard. And for the first time, regret didn't feel like emotion. It felt like loss that could never be reversed. The evening sky over the city had turned deep amber, fading slowly into a calm, endless blue. From the top floor of the glass tower, the world below looked small, streets like glowing veins, cars like moving thoughts, life continuing without pause, without apology. Inside a quiet private lounge, the atmosphere was different.
No chaos. No noise.
Only stillness. The ex-wife stood near the window, watching the city she had once felt invisible in. Now it felt different, not because it had changed, but because she had. Behind her, the billionaire spoke in a calm, steady voice. You never needed saving, he said. She didn't turn immediately. People assume transformation always begins with rescue, she replied softly. A faint pause followed. Then she finally faced him. But it doesn't, she added. It begins the moment you stop waiting to be chosen. The billionaire nodded slightly, as if he had already understood that truth long before it was spoken. Across the room, a portfolio of documents lay open, strategic expansions, leadership structures, global projections. Her name appeared in key sections, not as an addition, but as a central force shaping direction. This was not a sudden rise. It was continuation. Outside this moment, outside this tower, there had been years of quiet growth, decisions made in silence, strength built without recognition, intelligence never fully seen by the world that once confined her to a smaller version of herself. The billionaire's voice lowered. I didn't change your path. I just made it visible. She gave a faint, knowing expression. And sometimes visibility is all that was missing. A soft knock echoed at the door. The husband stood there, uncertain, broken in a way he could no longer hide. For a moment, no one spoke. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, saw not the woman he had left behind, but the woman who had always been beyond what he understood. I didn't realize, he started, voice fragile. She interrupted gently, not with anger, but with finality. That was always the problem. You didn't realize. Silence fell. Not heavy, just complete. The billionaire stepped slightly closer, not protective but present, a reminder that her world no longer required permission from the past. The husband's shoulders dropped as the truth settled fully into him, not a shock anymore, but acceptance. He had not lost her in a single moment. He had simply never truly seen her at all. She turned back toward the window, where the city lights now reflected in her eyes like something infinite and unbroken. And behind her, the door quietly remained open, but not for him. Because some endings are not closures. They are confirmations that certain lives were never meant to intersect forever.